Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
We're here today because it is 71 years since the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, and it's a part of history that not many people know about, and it is also sadly linked to British policy in the region. Britain was controlling Palestine. It was the British mandate before 1948 for decades, and they helped facilitate the creation of Israel by ethnically cleansing the Palestinians. 750,000 Palestinians were forced from their homes, 531 villages were wiped out, destroyed, and 11 urban neighbourhoods emptied of their citizenry. This was most of the population of Palestine that was actually forced out. It was premeditated, and it was done with a lot of violence. There was over 11 massacres, and what it was the beginning of horrendous suffering and injustice faced by the Palestinians. It was the opening crime, if you like, that Palestinians had to face. And they were forced out. They were forced out of their homes. They had to march along the beach of Gaza into Egypt, into Syria, into Lebanon, and that's why the Palestinian refugee population, that numbers something like over 7 million right now, they have no right to return. Israel has denied them the right, even though under United Nations legislation you have the right of return, United Nations Articles, Resolutions 194. So they have a right to return home. They've not even been allowed back home, most of them, to even walk in their own villages. And Israel was created, not only that, but having taken, that was 80% of Palestine taken. And then they took another 20% in 1967, and that's the occupied territories, which is illegal in international law, which is Gaza, West Bank, East Jerusalem. So, you might argue, right, that's bad enough. But Palestinians right now, I was in Gaza for 2 years, 2010, 2012. Palestinians now are facing even worse situation than they've ever faced. So they are being bombed, for example. They are being, just about a week and a half ago, 25 Palestinians were killed. Pregnant mothers, 4-month-old, a 14-month-old. There was a child of 12. This was 25 people in 2 days. Bombing of Gaza 2014, 51 days, 2,200 people killed, 500 children, Palestinians, 51 days. They destroyed everything. There was like 62 clinics and hospitals, 45 ambulances were bombed. So they're now facing the horror from the skies. And when Palestinians protest, like the last year, they march towards the border. They're marching in Gaza with just a flag, unarmed, and they're marching and they're getting massacred. 190 Palestinians, at least, according to the UN, have been killed by marching in the streets in Gaza. And of course, Britain, we've got UK Stop Arming Israel here, our weapons have actually gone up in sales the more Israel has bombed Gaza. Palestinians don't have any navy, any military ground force, any air force. They are just literally 2 million people, for example, in Gaza, who are under the bombs. I was there in Gaza. It was like F-16s in the sky. That's the life of population that's mostly children. 2 million people. It's a tiny little place, most crowded places on the planet, and mostly refugees. And they are left. The whole world turns their backs on them. But the movement is growing, and one of the big campaigns is to say no more weapons to Israel to commit these crimes. And Britain, sadly, has gone up from 22 million to 80 million, and now 220 million the last in 2017. This is a massive exponential shift in the amount of weapons that we're supplying the UK, and we're arming the world. We're arming Saudi Arabia bombing Yemen. It's a massive humanitarian crisis, up to 12 potentially millions that are at risk from famine. This is where the weapons goes. You follow the money, and of course the banks as well. HSBC invests in Caterpillar, for example. Caterpillar provide the bulldozers that are, running over Palestinian homes, because Israel continues to demolish Palestinian homes. And it's not just for me. Like, this is the actions we're taking is kind of taken from the example of what the heroes against the South African apartheid took, and whether it's Mandela or Tutu. And all these others that called on the world, we don't have an army, we're weaker, please, it's up to solidarity internationally, it's up to sanctions and boycotts. And so therefore civil society, people of conscience, stand with the Palestinians in the same way they stood with South Africa, and you can take it from them. Nelson Mandela said we will never have our freedom without the freedom of the Palestinians. Nelson Mandela's grandson has been to Palestine recently, Mandela, and he came to London and said it's the worst kind of apartheid. Just, the worst kind of subjugation according to race against the Palestinians in Israel and in the occupied territories. And this is also like, Tutu, he's done the same. He went to Palestine calling for boycotts of Israel, the same way in which boycotts continued to work against South Africa, because governments support Israel to do this. And they give them the weapons, they sell them the weapons. So Manchester has a history of standing with the oppressed. Manchester has a history of understanding when people are at the rough end of it should get justice. And actually, we've had many campaigns. We've had campaigns against HSBC, and they divested from Elbit, Israel's biggest weapons manufacturer. This was a 2-year-long campaign, and we've been here doing it in Manchester streets. Puma is sponsoring the Israeli Football Association. They don't allow Palestinians to go and train in different places. They bomb Palestinian stadiums. I was there in Gaza when they bombed it. We marched inside the stadium and saw the big craters in the destroyed stadium. They've killed many Palestinian footballers. They arrested Mahmoud Sarsak without any charge, an international footballer, 21-year-old. They arrested him and put him on a year and a half and tortured him in prison. This is what they did to the footballers. So when I was in Gaza, I taught in the university there. I lost 2 of my students in the bombing. I lost 2 of my students, one of them her entire family with one bomb. She was funny, her name was Huda. She used to come in to class early to explain to me exactly what her life was going on, and she was going to get married and she was trying to have hope for the future. By then she'd had 2 little babies when the bomb came down, wiped her out entirely, her whole family. I taught a family that lost 29 members in 3 days, the Samuni family. I really hope people look it up, because they were inside, they were rounded up, 100 members of their extended family, all one big street with various family members, extended family members. And they, over 3 days, they rounded them up, killed a few of them, killed some children as they marched into the houses, put them in one house. For a day and a half, they couldn't get out. They couldn't even get food. Some uncles went and they got shot trying to get food. And then they bombed the house. 21 members were killed in one bomb. And they talk about the rockets. The rockets are like Second World War technology. In fact, that one bomb that killed 21 people killed more people than the rockets have killed in 8 years. Because such is the complete domination of Israel over the Palestinians. And if you've got Tutu and Mandela comparing it to apartheid, then what are we going to argue with them about what is and isn't injustice and racial discrimination and attacks like this? No, we stand with them, just like we did with Mandela. And they should know. And I've seen it myself, so no one has to argue with me about it. I've seen the carnage. I was in the hospitals as those kids were arriving one by one, elderly, it didn't matter, they were bombing the whole lot. They took out an entire family when I was there, 13 members. And I was there as they pulled the women out of the rubble. I was watching it. I've got a video of all kinds of things there when it was going on during the bombing in 2012 when I was there. So it's very real, but the worst thing is the connect is here, and that's where we have to feel empowered, because we shouldn't stand for this. When our banks, like HSBC, and our government and arms companies are arming to the teeth some of the worst regimes, like Israel that's bombing Gaza, like Saudi Arabia that's bombing Yemen. So this is why we're taking action, this is why we're here today, and this is why we're going to continue to support them, just like many people did for South Africa and the blacks in South Africa. And we won't stop until Palestinians get the same rights as anyone else. They're after equality, it's hardly utopia. So that's all we're asking for.